North Carolina has become the latest state to introduce a bill banning critical race theory in public education. This is from our friend Chris Rufo. A bill from the General Assembly of North Carolina, an act to demonstrate that the General Assembly's intent that students, teachers, administrators, and other school employees recognize that equality and rights of all persons, and to prohibit public school units from promoting certain concepts that are contrary to that intent. The General Assembly finds that Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of this state recognizes the equality and rights of all persons. Therefore, it is the intent of the General Assembly that students, teachers, administrators, and other school employees respect the dignity of others, acknowledge the right of others to express differing opinions, what a concept, and foster and defend intellectual honesty, freedom of inquiry, instruction, and freedom of speech and association. And then we go down to this section C here. Public school units shall not promote the following concepts: that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. An individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex is inherently racist or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race or sex. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. Moving on. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of his or her race or sex. An individual, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex, should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. And the belief that the United States as a meritocracy is racist or sexist, or was created by members of a particular race or sex to oppress other members of another race or sex. And of course we have to go into this section because this is the part that the journalists and the critical race theorists always lie about ad nauseum. They just can't help themselves but to lie about this. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit the following: speech protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution, accessing materials on an individual basis that would advocate concepts described in this subsection of the section or for the purpose of research or independent study, stating concepts described in subsection C, all those definitions that we just read, of this section, or assigning materials that incorporate such concepts for educational purposes in contexts that make clear the public school does not sponsor, approve, or endorse such concepts or work. So what that says is that you can teach that people believe all of those things, all of these things that we just read in subsection C. You can still teach those things. You just can't teach them as fact. You have to say, some people believe this, other people believe that. And then you have to give the students information and let them make up their own damn minds. Well, I think that this is pretty great that North Carolina has introduced this bill, but that's actually not what I want to do this video about. This was just a fun coincidence that I happened to see it right before I was actually about to make a different video for a different bill that's been introduced in the General Assembly of North Carolina that I actually think might be more important than the CRT ban. I really do, because here's the problem. How do you enforce the CRT ban? Because if you call your kid's school and you say, are you teaching critical race theory? What they're going to do is they're going to go, no, not us. I don't know why you would possibly think that we're teaching critical race theory. They're going to lie, is what's going to happen. Because the vast majority of schools out there are, in some classroom or another, currently teaching critical race theory. That is the truth. And the truth is also that the teachers are not your friends. The administrators are not your friends. They will lie to you about it. And so the only way that we really have to know whether or not this is actually being taught in schools is if the school's teaching materials are made publicly available. So you guys all remember when the pandemic first started, parents were actually being forced to sign waivers from their kids' schools saying, you won't watch what we're teaching your kids on Zoom, will you? No, you won't. You have to sign this waiver saying that you won't watch what we're teaching your children. The schools were trying to hide this type of information. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we want critical race theory to stop being taught in schools, then a bill like what just got introduced in North Carolina could be one of the solutions that gets us to that point. So this is a second bill that's been introduced, an act to ensure academic transparency. The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts Article 8 of Chapter blah 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 blah, inform the public about instructional materials. The governing body of a public school unit shall ensure the following information for each school it governs is prominently displayed on the school website by July 1st of each year, organized at a minimum by subject area and grade level. The instructional materials and activities that were used at the school during the prior school year, including the following: anything assigned, distributed, or otherwise presented in any course for which a student receives credit. Any material from among which students are required to select one or more if the selection is restricted by the school. Any procedures for the documentation, review, or approval of the learning materials used for student instruction at the school, including by the principal, curriculum administrators, or other teachers. The information displayed shall include the information necessary to identify the learning materials and activities used for instruction, including the title and the author, organization, or website associated with each material or activity. Nothing in this section shall be construed to require the digital reproduction of the materials themselves or the separate reporting of individual components of the materials produced as a single volume. So basically, they're mandating, you're going to show us where you're getting the materials that you're teaching from. Now, that might not be a direct correlation between, like, we're not going to maybe see everything because that would probably be like copyright infringement, something, I don't even know. But at least it's something. At least it is showing that the materials that these teachers are using are going to be made publicly available, so then parents or whomever wants to can go in and say, is this critical race theory? Is this something I'm comfortable with my kids learning, or is it not? Section C, a governing body that is responsible for the operation of the schools with fewer than 500 students. Cumulatively is not required, blah, 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 blah. That might be a problem, whatever. But anyway, I think that this is a really, really, really good idea. I think that this is actually probably more important than the critical race theory bans. And again, I'm in favor of the critical race theory bans. What people really need to understand about these bans is that these bans are designed to restrict the power of the government. They're designed to put very specific parameters on what teachers can teach and how they can teach it, which is absolutely not an infringement on free speech at all. What this does is it says, here are the boundaries that you have, state employees, because teachers at the end of the day are state employees. They're being paid with your state taxes, and the very least that they owe you is a transparent accounting of exactly what it is they're flipping teaching. So I really hope we start to see more companion bills pop up about this. I know in my state of New Hampshire that legislators are seeing this because that's how I found out about it. Some of the legislators asked me what I thought about it. So I think that this is a good thing. I think this is a good companion piece for the CRT bans. And hey, maybe you can't get a CRT ban passed in your schools, but how are the Democrats going to argue that this is racist? How are the Democrats actually going to argue that it is racist to make publicly available and transparent the materials that children are being taught in schools? Let's see them try to squirm their way out of this one. All right, guys, that's all I have for this video. Just another quick update. I'll catch you later.